Marvel's Spider-Man on PC is the worst Sony PC port to date. And I do not say that lightly. I say this as a beloved, massive fan of the PlayStation 4 release and the PlayStation 5 release. I've beaten Spider-Man 3 times now. I've beaten the DLCs each twice. I know this game inside and out, and that is why I can come to you as an authority on the topic and state definitively, after spending the first 3 hours with the game, courtesy of an early review code from Insomniac Games, without a shadow of a doubt, without a trace of doubt, both confidently and unfortunately, Marvel's Spider-Man is an absolute broken mess on the PC, and sadly, I did not expect anything less. Sony has an absolutely atrocious track record when it comes to releasing games on the PC. Personally, I just don't think they should bother anymore. We should wait until PS4 emulation catches up. That'll be a much smoother, superior way than playing these broken games. Now, those of you in the comments, those of you who are scratching your heads or concerned, what are the issues, Dead Metal? Well, let me tell you what the issues with the PC port of Spider-Man are. In no particular order, just jotting them down as I went through my first 3 hours of the review copy. This game suffers from an abundance of stuttering. You want to talk like shader compilation issues? This is like next level. Every 3 to 4 seconds, there's a very awkward, very apparent jerkiness, whether or not you're moving the camera, whether or not the character's in the middle of an animation, and it completely undoes this smooth web slinging at that silky, perfect 30 FPS we had on the PlayStation 4. And on top of this, G-Sync or AMD FreeSync does not solve the issue because it is built into the game engine. This engine was not designed for PC, much like those atrocious ports of Days Gone, Death Stranding, Horizon, and God of War. At this point, this is clearly a Sony issue. They do not design their games with the possibility of transferring or porting them to other platforms at all. It's very clear this is a Sony issue. No Microsoft game that I have ever played on PC has this issue. But let's say you could live with the stuttering, or maybe you cap your FPS at 30 to make it less apparent. Okay, I can see that. You want the cinematic flair. Okay, fine. You know, there's far bigger issues. I could honestly get over the nausea-inducing stuttering. I really could if it wasn't for the unforgivable, very predictable, very consistent crashes. Now, let's be honest. If you're gaming on Windows, your games are going to crash. That's just what PC gamers, that's what they get. That's what they're used to, right? I'm a PC gamer. My games crash about 3 to 4 times per session. It's par for the course. Everybody knows that if you're going to game on PC, you're going to have to deal with the crashes. I have never dealt with crashes of this magnitude. I've never dealt with crashes of this severity. Crashes of this stupidity, mind you, all right? There's more crashes here than the evening after an exam with a bunch of college students hopped up on ADD medication. All right, there's more crashes here than a demolition derby. I have played 3 hours of this game. It's about all I could stomach, but I had to get at least to the 3-hour mark because if you've played the game, you know that's when the world really opens up. You're free to tackle the side quests, free to tackle the main objectives. I had no less than 31 crashes in that time. You do the math there, dear viewer. That is averaging over 10 crashes an hour. My drivers were updated. I had the NVIDIA Game Ready drivers on my RTX 3090 Ti. All right. My rig performs flawlessly otherwise. And the game, my Windows was updated, right? So any possible thing you could think of other than the very, very ill-begotten excuse, there's a day one patch. Of course there's a day one patch, but it's not going to solve these issues. I am absolutely convinced these issues are buried deep into the heart of the game's code, and Insomniac, instead of resolving it, or instead of making an attempt to resolve it by delaying the release of Spider-Man PC, they're just going to shovel it out and then they're going to forget about it. We've seen this with numerous companies. We saw it with Resident Evil Village until Digital Foundry called them out. We saw it with New World actually catching GPUs on fire. I'm not exaggerating. Go look it up. New World, people's GPUs, especially the EVGA ones, which I unfortunately have, caught on fire because the game's menu screen had an unlocked frame rate and the GPU spun up so fast, so hard, the fans were going blazing around, the thing caught on fire. Capcom Monster Hunter Rise, terrible port, caused so many issues. It's just a recurring theme that these developers don't care about the PC market, and Marvel Spider-Man does very remarkably little to change that particular conception. And, I would almost say, okay, crashes, they're more than PC gamers are used to, but PC gamers are used to crashes. Stuttering, the shader compilation issues that we've seen on Stray, the shader compilation issues that we've seen on the Resident Evil games, the shader compilation issues that we've seen on Ghostwire Tokyo. It's becoming a feature, a touting point, something to look forward to more than anything else. I could almost get on board with that. Cap the FPS at 30 to make the stuttering less prevalent. Just be ready to suffer through an abundance of crashes, and then maybe, just maybe, you could have a good experience, right? I mean, I'm not wrong, right? Like, you could get on the same page and you could enjoy the game despite the issues if it wasn't for this fatal flaw that exists in this port that renders the game more or less obsolete. There's a very severe, very legal problem. And that problem is that this game fundamentally is nothing more than a Control-C, Control-V port job of the Batman Arkham games, which were done over 10 years ago, which were done significantly better by a more talented company known as Rocksteady, who proceeded to pump out 3 absolute bangers, finish their trilogy off with the strongest entry thus far, Arkham Knight, universally beloved as the greatest, heralded as the greatest Batman story ever told across any medium. That includes comics, that includes movies, that includes games, that includes it all. Spider-Man, whether you're playing it on the PC, PS4, PS5, PS6, cloud, does not matter, is nothing more than a remnant of the absolute carbon copy fest that Batman Arkham Asylum started back in 2009. And the fact that this many people are willing to look over what is essentially fraud, what is essentially plagiarism, because their favorite superhero stands in place of Batman, I have 2 things to say to you deluded clowns. Number 1, Batman would completely destroy Spider-Man 1v1. You can't argue it. What's the one thing? What's Batman's superpower? All the nerds down in the comments, oh, but Batman doesn't have a superpower. That's what makes him cool. He's got a superpower. Let me tell you what Batman's superpower is, you motherless clown bag. It is the fact that he is filthy fucking rich. Being rich is a superpower. Don't like it? Go cry salty tears in my comment section and go suck your thumb in the corner. He's got so much money. What's the one thing that Spider-Man, what's the one thing that Peter Parker doesn't have? Money! He's a broke-ass college student, doesn't know how to manage his finances. He ought to call into the Dave Ramsey show. The fact that he has no money is his downfall, is his absolute undoing. He's a broke-ass white boy living in New York City, all right? He's gifted, he's privileged with living in the greatest city in the world, and the dumbass found a way to fuck that up to the point where he can't even pay rent. It doesn't matter what Spider-Man you're viewing, okay? Whether you're watching Mr. Dickovich rip into Peter Parker's ass in Spider-Man 2 because the dumbass lost his pizza job and can't pay rent, or you're playing the Spider-Man PS4 game where he actually gets evicted because the moron cannot pay his bills. Batman doesn't have these problems. I don't care how many webs Spider-Man can shoot out of his asshole. I don't care how many black, red, blue suits that the motherfucker has tucked away for a rainy day. I don't care that he likes to swing around and hop on the top of the Empire State Building and get a view that you could die for. He's poor. Real smart people do not associate with poor people. All right? That's why Batman surrounds himself with Lucius Fox, Alfred, and a bunch of rich-ass people on the board who run his fucking company. That's why Batman wins. That's why I'm uninstalling this piece of shit Marvel Spider-Man game. It's a horrible port of a horrible game featuring a horribly poor protagonist, and I'm gonna go play as a smooth, slick-ass billionaire who has enough money to flaunt around driving the fucking Batmobile while Peter Parker is out here skimming the streets of New York City on a fucking moped.